Daf Yomi, Tractate Bava Batra, page 156b, and it's in the middle of a Mishnah. So the Mishnah starts in the bottom of 156a. We'll start from the Mishnah, bottom of 156a. Hamachalak nechas of Alpi, if Rabbi Elazar Omer, echad b'ri v'echad mesukan, nechas t'mishiach l'machrayas, nikton b'kesef b'shtar, chazak v'she'en lahem machrayas, ein nikton ela b'mishicha. Excuse me. With regard to one who divides his property between various recipients by means of verbal instruction, Rabbi Elazar says, both in the case of one who is healthy and in the case of one who is dangerously ill, the halacha is as follows. Property that serves as a guarantee, in other words, land, is acquired by means of money, by a deed of transfer, or by taking possession of it, and that which does not serve as a guarantee, being movable property, can be acquired only by pulling. Now we're on the top of 156b. Amrulo, the rabbi said to Rabbi Elazar, Mas b'iman shel b'nei roichel shel ha'isach ha'ile. Amrutun kevinos leviti, kevinti. Leviti, v'hi shnei masar monei. Umeisa v'kimos tvrei. Amrahem b'nei roichel tikbrei miman. There was an incident involving the mother of the sons of Rochel who was sick, who was said, my brood shall be given to my daughter, and it is valued at 1,200 dinars. And this woman subsequently died, and the sages upheld her statement. This indicates that a person on his deathbed can give property without an act of acquisition. Rabbi Elazar said to them, that case was different. The sons of Rochel should be buried by their mother. In other words, he cursed them. It is not possible to bring a proof from this incident, as these sons were wicked people. Consequently, when ruling in this matter, the sages did not act in accordance with the halacha, but allowed the mother of the sons of Rochel to give this valuable piece of jewelry to their sister without an act of acquisition having been performed. That's the end of the Mishnah. Now we're going on to the Gemara. The Gemara says, Tanya, we learned the Braise. Amr lehen Rabbi Eliezer lechachomi, maise b'maroni, echad shohay b'Yerushalayim, v'hayu loy metaltelin, halbe ubikesh litnam b'matana. Amru lo, ein lahem takono, ad sheyakne, al gav kalka. It is taught in a Braita, Rabbi Eliezer said to the rabbis, there was an incident involving a certain man of Meron, who was in Jerusalem, and he had a lot of movable property. And he desired to give the movable property as gifts to various individuals, but they could not be acquired by pulling. The rabbi said to him, there is no remedy for transferring the property unless he transfers the movable property by means of transferring the ownership of land. סמוך לירושלים. ואמר צפונו לפלויני, ואימו 100 צאן ו100 חוביוס, ודרוימו לפלויני, ואימו 100 צאן ו100 חוביוס, ומס וקיימו חכמים אסתיבורו, ואמרו לו משם ראיו, ורויני בוריהו. He went and acquired one plot of rocky land adjacent to Jerusalem, and he said, I give the north part of this area to so-and-so, and with it the 100 sheep and the 100 barrels. And I give the south part of the area of so-and-so with it 100 sheep and 100 barrels. And he died, and the sages upheld the statement. This indicates that a person on his deathbed cannot transfer property without the act of acquisition. The rabbi said to Rabbi Eliezer, do you bring proof from there? The man of Meron was healthy at the time. This was not the gift of a person on his deathbed, and it could not be acquired by verbal instruction. Excuse me for a moment. I need to get a drink of water. My throat is just, well... Bissel Wasser, my throat. with the vocal cords. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol nהיה bidbaro. Mayim Chaim. Where were we holding? The guy from Meron was healthy, right? So you can't say that was a gift on the deathbed. Okay, that was not a gift of a person on his deathbed. It could not be acquired by verbal trans, and it could not be acquired by verbal destruction. Okay. Amar lahen b'nei roichel tikberem iman. Just a thought came to me that it's just the idea. It says a person has to do tshuva a day before he dies, or she dies. But then the Gemara asks, but they don't know when they're going to die. So wouldn't it be that every single day a person technically has the status of on their deathbed? Because there are other cases in the Gemara where a person wasn't necessarily lying in a physical bed, but he was in a situation where death was imminent and it was considered his deathbed. Lamashal, being dropped out of a plane without a parachute. That is a shkivmira right there. Even though he's not in a bed, so what I'm saying is I don't see why that's any different than a healthy person walking on the street. Theoretically could, I don't want to say any negative things, but a person could pass away at any moment. So I don't understand why this Meron person, he was healthy, but I mean, any person could be on there. You know what I mean? Anyway, it's a question. Amar lahen b'nei roichel tikberem iman. My time kolayelu. Amar Rav Yehuda Mishmuel l'kaim koitzim kerem hayu. Rabbi Eliezer l'time is the l'kaim koitzim kerem. Rabbi Eliezer oimer kiddush v'chamim v'loi kiddush ela davar shekamoim v'kaim. The Mishnah teaches Rabbi Elazar said to them the case was different. The sons of Rochel should be buried by their mother. The Gemara asks, what is the reason he was cursing them? Rabbi Yehuda says that Shmuel says they were maintaining thorns in a vineyard that did not uproot them. And Rabbi Eliezer conforms to his line of reasoning, as we learned in the Mishnah in Klayim 5:8. With regard to one maintains thorns in a vineyard, Rabbi Eliezer says he has proscribed the vineyard, rendering it forbidden due to the prohibition against diverse kinds. And the rabbis say only growing a matter, meaning a crop, the like of which people usually maintain, proscribes a vineyard and renders it forbidden. Bishlomo karkoim chazai elakoitzim lamai chazai Amar Rechanina v'atam Rabbi Eliezer shekein be'Arabia mekaymin koitzim misodis legam aleihen. The Gemara asks, granted, if it were for saffron, charkom is saffron, curcumin, kind of interesting. If it were for saffron that grew in the vineyard, is it useful for seasoning and other uses? It is useful for seasoning and other uses, and therefore it prescribes the vineyard. But with regard to thorns, for what are they useful? Rabbi Chanina said, what is the reasoning of Rabbi Eliezer? It is because in Arabia they maintain thorns in the fields for their camels. Rabbi Eliezer holds that since thorns are maintained in one place, they are considered useful everywhere. I don't know how thorns can be useful for camels. At any rate, let's continue. Amar Rabbi Levi koinin kinyan b'shchimira afilu b'Shabbos. V'lo lachosh l'divrei Rabbi Eliezer ela shema titarev da'ater elav. Rabbi Levi says an act of acquisition may be performed in order to effect acquisition of property from a person on his deathbed, even on Shabbat. Even though transactions are not performed on Shabbat, and this, that an act of acquisition must be performed, is not stated in order to take into consideration the statement of Rabbi Eliezer that the gifts of any person on his deathbed require an act of acquisition. Rather, the reason for this is that if a person on his deathbed requests the performance of an act of acquisition, his request is fulfilled, lest his anxiety upon seeing that his will is not being carried out cause him to lose control of his mind due to his grief, exacerbating his poor physical state. That's the end of that. We are starting a new Mishnah, and it's almost at the end of the Amud. Okay. Mishnah says, Rabbi Eliezer Oimer, B'Shabbos devar kayamim, b'nei she'ein yochol lichtoif, aval loi b'chol risho Oimer, B'Shabbos amru, v'kal v'chomer b'chol. Okay, Rabbi Eliezer says on Shabbat, the verbal statement of a person on his deathbed stands, as he cannot write, and the sages instituted that he can effect the transaction verbally, he can affect the transaction verbally, lest the inability to do so exacerbate his condition. But a verbal instruction does not stand if stated on a weekday. Rabbi Yehoshua says, with regard to Shabbat, the sages stated that his verbal instruction is sufficient, even though writing is prohibited, and one can infer by Kal V'chomer, meaning a fortiori, that the same applies with regard to a weekday when writing is permitted. I don't understand that. If writing is permitted, why should it be a Kal V'chomer that the verbal would be working? Maybe the opposite. If it's permitted on a weekday, then Kal V'chomer on Shabbos. But not Kal V'chomer on the weekday. Anyways, okay. Kayotze boi zachin lekoton be'en zachin legodol. Divrei Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yehoshua moed lekoton amru Kal V'chomer legodol. Similarly, one can acquire property on behalf of a minor, but one cannot acquire property on behalf of an adult, since he can perform the act of acquisition himself. This is the statement of Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yehoshua says the sages stated this halacha with regard to a minor. One may infer from regard to Kal V'chomer, this also applies with regard to an adult who is able to perform the act of acquisition himself. Which again, I don't understand that reasoning, but that is that. You engage in conversations, it's going to be, no, you don't understand this, or getting angry and explain it to you now. So I just, the Gemara says here, Masnisan Mani, Rabbi Yehuda he, Tanya, Rabbi Meir Omer, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Bachol, Devar Kayamim, B'fnei Shiachol Lichtov, Avolo B'Shabbos. The Gemara asks, what opinion is expressed in the Mishnah? The Gemara answers, this is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. This is, as it is taught in a Batra, Rabbi Meir says, that Rabbi Eliezer says, with regard to a person on his deathbed who distributes his property by verbal instruction, on a weekday his statement stands because he can write, but his statement does not stand on Shabbat because he cannot write. Rabbi Yehoshua